What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Behind the Facade. I am your host, Gavin J. Gallagher, and on this podcast I explore the mental and emotional game often playing out subconsciously both in your mind and the mind of everyone else in the real estate or property investment market. The key to success in this game is to master your mindset and behaviour, to take control of your thoughts, your emotions, and most importantly, your ego. Welcome to the show. Alright guys, today's episode is coming to you after a short break, and I know it is not usual for me to take a break. I haven't taken many breaks in the last 4 years that I've been producing this, but the last week or two have just been chaotic, and primarily because my wife Ilga, she got COVID about 2 weeks ago, and when she got COVID it was actually kind of a bad dose and she was out for the count, and so I've been basically looking after the kids and looking after her and all this kind of stuff, and between that and work and everything like that, it just became pretty hard going. And so today I'm recording this on the 31st of August, the last day of the year, the last day of the month of August, and it's in this past few days I've actually celebrated my 52nd birthday. And my son Dominic celebrated his 4th birthday. Yes, we share our birthdays. We have the very same birthday. And those of you who've been listening for a long time will maybe recall back in August 2020, this is around the time that the podcast actually began, I had the birth, Ilga had Dominic in the hospital during COVID and all that, and I recorded an episode a couple of days later mentioning it and stuff like that. So anyway, this week celebrating my son's birthday, my birthday, and there's also another celebration, and I'm very, very proud, and I don't mind sharing it here. It's a bit of a gushing father kind of thing, but my daughter Ashley, who is my second eldest daughter, she just got her Leaving Cert results in the last couple of days. And to all of our astonishment, including hers, she scored 625 points, which those of you who are listening and who are not familiar with the Irish state exams, she got basically A's in every single subject, the highest marks possible in every subject, and you can't get a higher score than 625. So it's been really, shocking to us all. We knew that she was going to do well, but we didn't have any idea she was going to do that well. And so it's been a crazy 2 weeks. I needed the break, to be honest. And I kind of figured to myself, look, I've been putting these out on a weekly basis for the past 4 years. I don't think I've missed more than one episode or two in that period of time, and therefore I deserve a break. And so guys, cut me some slack. I hope you don't mind that I took a bit of a break from it. I thought what I'll do in the middle of all this break and stuff like that, I thought to myself, you know what, why don't I shake up the format just a little bit and introduce a couple of changes, and I'll be revealing those over the next couple of days. But those of you who are watching on YouTube, where I'm producing this and putting it out as the Behind the Facade podcast channel, you'll notice that I have a slightly new format, and I have new artwork and all sorts of stuff, and it's nice to be able to kind of play around with some of these things as I'm showing off right now while I'm speaking to you. But what I'm going to be doing today is I'm going to be talking about some of the the lessons and some of the wisdom that I have picked up in my 52 years, 52 trips around the sun, as we like to say. But before I get into the episode, what I'm going to actually do is I just want to let you know about the fact that I'm kicking off a new intake of my Accelerator. That is the mentoring program that I have. And on the first Saturday of October, that's the 5th of October, we'll be having an in-person event. And what I normally do in these in-person events is I welcome in the new members of the intake. And so that you have about a month to sort of sign up and become part of that new intake. And what we'll be doing on the 5th of October, we'll be networking with the existing members of the Accelerator, the Mastermind. And I usually do kind of a planning workshop, and I do usually bring in a guest speaker to talk about some aspect of property investment, stuff like that. And one thing I will say about this little network that I've created is that it's a really great network. And I don't mean that as in I'm bragging about my network. It's just I really, really enjoy working with the guys and the girls that are involved in this program. And yesterday we had a call, and my client Greg told us that he was going off that evening to pop the question to his girlfriend Siobhan, and we got a message in the WhatsApp chat that we have that she said yes. And so big celebrations to Greg and Siobhan. Congratulations, guys. I wanted to get that in there. And this little kind of community that I've built up, I'm really proud of it, and I'm really pleased at the way it's kind of growing. And so if you'd like to become part of this, if you are, we'll say, a contractor or somebody who owns their own business, or perhaps you're a time poor executive working in a company and you would like the idea of building some sort of portfolio that it has a robust passive income that could support you stepping back from the full-time slog that you find yourself in. I know most of the guys that I'm speaking to, they enjoy what they do, but they recognize that at some point in the future, they'd like to kind of ease back a little bit, and not for the income to ease back at the same time. And therefore, that's what property allows you. It allows you to maintain that income, but also to free up a little bit of your time. It's not so time demanding. It does have its challenges for sure, but it's not as demanding as some jobs can be. So if you're interested, do reach out to me. I'm going to put a link down below if you'd like to book a call with me. We'll discuss whether or not you're a good fit for the program. And so now, guys, back to the show. So me turning 52, it has given me a lot of perspective. I've been thinking about this a lot, and I always, at the end of every year, right before my birthday, I usually sit down quietly in front of a journal and I start kind of writing things down and stuff like that. And I've been doing exactly that. And I've been thinking about, I'm now 30 years in the real estate sector. I'm 30 years in business, we'll say. And in, that period of time, I've learned a lot, and I'd like to share some of that wisdom. But also, I'm the father of 5 amazing kids, and I've survived a number of, major challenges in my life, like, for example, the death of my father. And the biggest one that's kind of really shaped me in many ways is the crash of 2008, the financial crash, because of all the collateral damage that it did to my world. And that, as I've mentioned before, to those of you who are familiar with the podcast, I lost the family home in that. I lost my marriage, collapsed in that, and my, just my income collapsed to zero. And my net worth went from, I think I had a portfolio value of 65 million at the peak, and within a few short years of that, I was negative 16 million. So I've been through the wars, as we say. And the question I want to ask myself in my journal was, has my enthusiasm been dampened by all of that? And I would say no, it has not. And I was, has it caused me to give up on my dreams and on my ambitions and stuff like that? No chance. And I think life is a journey. It's like this continual process. You never reach the destination. You're always on the way to whatever it is that you have planned. And so it's a continuous process of learning and experiences and things like that. And that's the way I think it makes sense to look at it. Don't be thinking about someday I'll achieve such and such, and until then I'm not really living, a life. I'm just striving for that day when I achieve something. I don't think that's the way to look at it. You really have to just take it as a kind of a journey. And if you think about, a marathon, you start a marathon and you finish, 4 or 5 hours later after doing 42 kilometers. But that's a destination. Like, even if you've taken a long time, there's a destination. With life, it's basically you're running and there's no stopping. You just keep on running. And then at some point, your journey comes to an end. But you don't have a great deal of say in when that takes place. Now, during that journey, you're going to take in some really extraordinary highs that just make you feel amazing. And there's the potential to inflate your ego when you do that. But you'll also experience some dreadful, difficult lows that are going to challenge you to the core. And you must realize that this is just how it is, that there's no avoiding the difficult times. You might do your best to avoid them, but they're always going to happen at some point. And so you must embrace resilience and just that fighting spirit, never to give up on your dream. Now, probably the biggest lesson to take on board is just to enjoy the journey as you're going through it. Even when you're in the tough times, always be looking for the win. And I would even say, welcome and be grateful for the challenges. Because, if I didn't experience the 2008 crash, although naturally I kind of wish I hadn't, but if I hadn't experienced that, I wouldn't be the person I am today. I wouldn't have the stories that I have today to share with you. And probably you wouldn't be here listening to me because I wouldn't be that interesting of a guy. It's the comeback stories that actually make you interesting. And so the challenges are part of the journey that make you the person that you are. And, at the end of the day, you just have to keep on fighting and doing your best and pushing through. And, at some point, the universe is going to decide that it's now your turn to get off this merry-go-round. But until that day, you're doing your best and you're pushing forward and you're really enthusiastic and enjoying every moment. And that's the way I look upon my life. Now, a very distressing event has taken place in the last couple of weeks, and this is the tragic death of the tech mogul Mike Lynch. And this has been really, I've really felt this myself personally for a couple of reasons, and I'm going to explain some of those reasons now, but I'll just let me go and give a little bit of background. Like Mike Lynch, he's described often as the Bill Gates of Britain because he was this tech entrepreneur, but he was actually Irish. I don't know if everyone is aware of that. His mom was a nurse from Tipperary, and his dad was a firefighter from Cork. And I think when they got married, they moved to the UK and Mike was born. And he grew up in the UK, but, Irish parents, so very much an Irish heritage there. And he built this company, I think he started in 96, so he's in his 20s or something like that, called Autonomy. And he built it up into a really, really successful business. And Autonomy was sold. Mike Lynch managed to do a deal with Hewlett-Packard, HP, in 2011, after, we'll say, 12, 13 years building up the company. And he sold the business for a cool $11 billion, US dollars. And at the time, it was one of the biggest deals in the tech industry. And so fair play to Mike Lynch. I mean, that's one of the reasons why he was described as the Bill Gates of Britain. But it was not long after that transaction that Hewlett-Packard turned around, and perhaps it was, buyer's remorse, as we call it, but Hewlett-Packard accused Mike and his management team of essentially cooking the books and creating false valuation so that they would get paid the 11 billion. And this turned into this massive, massive legal battle that went on for years and years. And all that time, Mike and his team were fighting it. And in 2022, Mike Lynch was extradited to the United States to stand trial for what they said was his guilt in this whole kind of case. And Mike Lynch was looking at spending 20 years behind bars if he was found guilty. So this was a major, major disruption in his life, clearly, but also he was looking at spending the best part of the rest of his life in jail. And so can you imagine the stress that would have brought? And in March of this year, 2024, he was found not guilty on all counts, and he walked out of the court a free man. Now, so you can imagine having spent nearly 2 years fighting for this, and then you come out of it exonerated, you completely walk free. So you can imagine the guy is thinking to himself, wow, I've just been acquitted. I was looking at 20 years. This is a reason. If there was ever a reason to celebrate, this is a reason to celebrate. I think we'd all agree on that. And so he took his family and the team that were involved in the legal case on a extended holiday aboard his big luxury yacht. Now, he sold the company for 11 billion, so the guy's a billionaire, a very wealthy man. And he owned this huge, huge yacht called the Bayesian. And this yacht has I think it's the second tallest mast in the world, in any sailing yacht. And I know a little bit about yachts because my dad was into sailing and stuff like that. But this, give you an idea just how big this yacht mast was. The mast on this yacht was the equivalent of a 28-story building. That's how big this boat was. And the boat itself was, I think, 180 feet long, which is the equivalent of a 18-story building if you were to stand it up. So massive, massive luxury yacht. And as I'm sure all of you, if not, unless you've been living in a cave, you've all heard the tragedy that happened just about 2 weeks ago on the 19th of August, in the middle of the night. The boat, the Bayesian, with all of these guys sitting on board celebrating, 4 o'clock in the morning, they've gone off to bed, and they are struck by a tornado, no less. And the tornado moved from the land onto the sea, and then when a tornado moves onto the sea, it sucks up the water, so it becomes what's known as a water spout. And this water spout hit them directly on the side of the boat. And of course, having a 27 or 28 story mast on a boat is probably not a good thing in a water spout or a tornado. And so the boat was knocked over onto its side. And they're all trying to figure out exactly what happened. But by knocking over the boat, I think because it happened in a very rapid sort of amount of time, it's not like, there's a big storm building. A tornado, when it comes very rapidly. And so the crew, from the stories that I've heard and stuff, the crew were on the boat, on the deck of the boat at 4 o'clock in the morning. They were all woken up. You need to go out and you need to secure the deck. So they're all up lifting the cushions and all that, because it's a luxury boat. They're lifting all the cushions into, stow them and stuff. And the dinghies that are normally on the side of the boat that are ready for people to kind of come and go into the harbour or into the port, they were all out there, I believe. And so when the boat got knocked to its side, the water started pouring into the boat through all these things. The crew were all turfed off the boat into the sea, and the guys that basically own the boat and all the guests, they were in bed asleep, and next minute they're thrown out of their beds across the room onto their basically onto the wall of the which is now the floor. It's a real tragedy because the boat sank very, very rapidly, and 7 people died on board the boat. They all drowned, and Mike Lynch included, like this guy that was celebrating this amazing walking away from the acquittal and being found not guilty. He died. His 18-year-old daughter, who had just gotten her exam results, Hannah, she died. Jonathan and Judy Bloomer. Jonathan was the chairman of Morgan Stanley International, which was the bank that were involved in this whole case, acting as a kind of, I think, a witness for Mike Lynch. Christopher and Nita Morvillo, who are the lawyer. Christopher was the lawyer for the case that represented Mike Lynch. He and his wife also died. And then the chef for the yacht, a guy called Ricaldo Thomas, he also drowned. And one of the reasons, I don't want to be dark and depressing and stuff like that, there's actually some positivity in this story, but I'm going to go a little bit deep for a few minutes just to explain why it has affected me so much. Is that because when I was 17 years of age, when I was back in 1989, I was a 17-year-old, and my dad was into sailing, and my dad had bought a boat, and it was in France, and we had to go down to France to pick it up and sail back to Ireland. And so we flew down, my dad and myself, and a couple of guys that were friendly with him that said that they'd come on the trip. We got onto this boat and we set sail, and the guy that was one of the guys in the crew, he said that he could read, or that he understood French. And so he was listening to the weather report in French, and he kind of translated it as everything's fine, it's going to be a bit breezy but should be fine, and let's go. So we set sail out into this breeze, and not long afterwards it turned into a Storm Force 11, which anyone who knows about sailing, Storm Force 12 is a hurricane, and so Storm Force 11 is like almost hurricane winds. So it was extremely, extremely difficult sailing conditions, and the seas got really, really big. And I was down below in the deck, and I used to get a little bit seasick on the first day of whenever I went out sailing. And so what I would do is I would always go down into the cabin, and I would wedge myself. There was a very narrow kind of a cabin, and I would wedge myself between the bed and this wall so that I could basically keep myself being bounced around in the waves to kind of keep myself from getting seasick. So I was wedged when I heard the guys up on the deck that were actually on the watch, and they basically just shouted, "Jesus, hang on, lads," something of that nature. And next minute we heard this big bang, and the boat was knocked completely on its side, and this huge wave washed over the whole boat and turned us essentially upside down. And I was in the bed, and next minute I'm watching, because I'm wedged, I'm not moving anywhere, I'm just watching, and all the drawers from the wardrobe that's kind of fixed to the wall, all the drawers came flying out across the room, but instead of falling to the floor, they all fell to the roof. And I can remember they all tore lumps out of the roof and stuff like that. And this was the first thing that I was lucky I was not there, because you would have been hit by big heavy drawers flying across the boat. The second thing, though, was that the boat turned, all this water started gushing into the boat. And thankfully, the boat righted itself. The boats have a big keel, and so they tend to kind of bounce back very quickly. The boat righted itself, and when it did, all of the water that had washed in started coming through the light fittings in the ceiling of the boat. And I can remember this was all happening in the space of like 5 or 6 seconds. So incredibly quickly, you're suddenly experiencing drawers flying, water coming in through the light fittings. I was watching my dad, because I was obviously very nervous, 17, looking at my dad to see what should I do next. And I could see his legs walking up the side of the boat as he was kind of like in the navigation. There's a little kind of area where you would read charts and stuff. And he was sitting there when this happened. And I can remember seeing his legs. He was walking from the floor onto the wall of the boat, onto the roof of the boat, and then back down as the boat righted itself. So this, essentially what happened to the Bayesian, I went through something similar in 1989 when I was 17 years of age. And the only difference between that disaster and our disaster was that we had all the hatches and the doors and everything all sort of closed up, and they didn't. They were kind of anchored in a luxury status where you've got the cushions out and you've got the umbrellas up and you've got all this kind of stuff for enjoying the weather, the nice weather of Sicily and Italy and stuff. And we were in a big storm, so we had locked everything down. That's the difference between what happened to them and what happened to us. And so you can imagine that leaves me with like a fairly knowledgeable sort of memory of what all of this was like. And so I can kind of visualize what they went through, because I went through something similar. And like anyway, it's kind of distressing thinking about it, because the boat sank in a couple of minutes. And I just know from my own experience of what probably happened to them is that they were probably, first of all, flung out of their beds across the room, like the drawers. So I would imagine some people were badly injured. The guys that were putting everything away up on the deck, they were flung into the water. So they were off the boat now. But the guys that were downstairs in this huge big yacht were now probably in darkness with water gushing in. And if you're in darkness and water's gushing in, and maybe you've just injured yourself being flung out of the bed, I can imagine that it must have been terrifying. And so very, very difficult moment. And it just shows you, though, like that these guys were there celebrating an incredible win. They were celebrating being acquitted and looking at 20 years of prison. And this is what the universe decides is the next move for these people. And that's what's really, life is not guaranteed. And so that is one of the reasons, like the positive message in this is that enjoy every moment. Like really, life is precious. Do not take it for granted, because you just don't know when it might come to an end. And, be grateful for all the little things, even if you're going through tough challenges. Be grateful for those challenges, because while you're fighting those challenges, you're alive and you're showing that you're worthy of the fight, and you keep on going and you keep on pushing. So what could have been my final moments back in 1989, we survived it. And a few years later, what happened to me, this is another experience of mine. I was driving a car. I was only, I think it was probably 20, maybe 19 or 20 or something like that. I was driving a car. It was a young lad driving a car. And you know what young lads driving a car can be like. They like to speed. And I was coming home late one night from a nightclub. 3 guys in the back, 1 in the front, one of my friends. And we were driving along, and sure enough, let's see how fast the car can go down this hill. We were driving down the hill. I remember seeing the speedometer hit 90 miles per hour when suddenly the wheels on the left side of the car started to, lose control, and the car started to kind of drift sideways at 90 miles an hour. And I can remember thinking, oh Jesus, what's happening here? And turning the wheel, trying to kind of like correct it, but the wheels having no effect. And suddenly we're drifting sideways down the road at 90 miles an hour. And you know these stories that you hear like every weekend or every other weekend, like there's some tragedy of so many boys like hit a tree and all died and stuff like that. Like that is essentially what was about to happen in this case. And I can remember as we're drifting at 90 miles an hour towards a wall was coming at me really, really quickly. And I can remember thinking, oh my God, we're going to hit this wall. And I had the wheel fully locked to the right and my foot firmly planted on the brakes. And yet we were just continuing to go straight ahead. And time slows down in these moments. And I can remember, even though we're moving very quickly towards a wall, time slowed down sufficiently for me to remember my dad giving me some advice, telling me, if you're ever driving the car with your foot on the brakes and you're not getting any traction, take your foot off the brake. And so in that split second, I took my foot off the brake, which is completely counterintuitive. I did that, and sure enough, next minute I hear all the gravel under the wheels of the tires hitting the bottom of the car as suddenly we got traction again. And as we're only a meter or two away from this wall coming at speed, suddenly, bang, we're boomerang like out across in the opposite direction away from the wall, spinning, doing like 360s all the way down this road. And the car came to a rest. I think we did like 2 360s. The car came to a rest in the middle of the road, not a scratch. And that was the moment. That was I was kind of freaked out by it, as you can imagine. But that was like a moment when I was near death. That's the second time that I experienced a near death. And I'd actually experienced something else before. I had been in a fire. I had started a fire. I was playing with matches. Not a good idea. But when you're a teenager, you do all these stupid things. I think I was maybe 16 years of age, and I was playing with a Zippo lighter, and the lighter fluid caught fire basically, and ended up spreading throughout the carpet and the curtains and the bed covers and everything. And in the process of throwing all that stuff out of the window to try to prevent the house going on fire, I got badly burnt my hands and my face and stuff like that. And so that was a fairly difficult moment, and I can remember panicking at the time. And then the last one, the most recent one that I can remember, was around about, I think maybe 15 years ago. I loved surfing, and when I was living in Spain, we used to jump in the car and we'd drive down to Tarifa, or we would drive even further. We went to Portugal, and Portugal has some amazing waves on the Atlantic coast. And so got into the water with my surfboard, paddled out into these big, big waves. And I can remember falling off the board, having a bit of a wipeout. And when I was under the water, the leash that ties your ankle to the board, that wrapped around my ankle and then the board got pulled away from me by the wave. And so it got really, really tight. And then it's like an elastic band or a bungee. It just became so tight that I couldn't actually free my legs from it. And so I was under the water and my legs are pinned together. And I can remember trying to swim with my arms, but your arms are just not enough to kind of get you back up. And so I was held down for 2 waves. And I can remember it was only when I had this like moment, I felt like at my breath, I was on my last breath. And I can remember just thinking to myself, geez, I got to go do something about this. So I pulled the leash towards me, and it freed up my ankles enough that I could actually get out, and I got up. And I came to the surface just as I was about to inhale a big mouthful of water. And the reason I'm sharing all of this is just to show you, and I'm sure many of you can reflect on something similar happening in your life, is that there are occasions when, I came very, very close to checking out. And, the universe intervened and I got another chance. And I fully intend to enjoy every moment that I've been given. And yes, I have struggles. Yes, I have challenges. But I ask myself every day, could it be worse? And there is always something that could be a lot worse. And so therefore, look at it as positive. Look at it as a chink of light. Look for the lesson. And I kind of strongly believe now that everything happens for a reason. And, life is precious. Don't take anything for granted. Now, one of the benefits of being a father quite late in life, I was 48 when my son Dominic was born. And one of the great things about that, one of the celebrations that I have, is that I get to live life, experience life vicariously through my son's eyes and all of my children's eyes. So Dominic was 4 the other day, and I turned 52. And for me, a birthday is nothing. It's like, it passes by. But for him, it's a big, huge deal. And it's a great reminder just that, to experience the joy of life and watching him play and discovering stuff and stuff like that. And so the lesson is stay curious and playful, like enjoy the moment, enjoy those moments that you get. And having older kids also gives me a different perspective. And I look at my daughter, Ashley, like she got an amazing result in her Leaving Cert. And you might kind of think to yourself, well, that's it. She's sorted now. Like there's nothing, she's made it. But sure enough, like I got nowhere near that level of points. Like I was not an academic person, so I don't know where she gets it from, I'll be honest. But it was a very proud moment for me. But no sooner did she get these 625 points and she celebrated for a few hours. And next minute she's on the phone to me saying, Dad, like, what am I going to do? Like, I've just realized that I think I'm going to have enough points to get into Galway University for medicine, but I don't have enough points to get into the Dublin colleges to do medicine. Because the way it works for medicine is that it's your points of your Leaving Cert, but it's also, you have to get this other thing called the HPAT, which is kind of some sort of an aptitude test. Very difficult one. And she had done that, but she had never really focused too much on it because she kind of thought that the Leaving Cert was what she wanted to focus on. So sure enough, she gets the points. And now the dilemma now is, if I get Galway, what should I do? Should I go to Galway, or should I wait, turn down the place and see if I can get into the Dublin universities and all this? And like, so the dilemma, straight after something amazing is achieved, the dilemma and the decisions start again. And so in the end now she's accepted, she's going to go to Galway and she's going to head off and do medicine there. And, it's really exciting for her. But 2 days ago, we didn't know whether she was going to be accepted. And now we know she's been accepted and she's decided to take the place. And now we have to go and figure out accommodation for her for the next couple of years in Galway. And so it's amazing how life deals these cards to you. And it's really, really, I'm delighted that she's going to head off and do that. But it is kind of daunting, leaving your family and friends. Like she's only 18 years of age and she's lived at home her whole life, and then all of a sudden off to the other side of the country. And so it's interesting. What is the lesson in that particular case? I think the lesson is, no matter what age you are, life always presents you with dilemmas and decisions that can alter the path that perhaps you had thought you were going to take. And so, like in my case, I studied architecture, and then soon after I graduated, I realized that it's not for me, and I'm going to get into property. And when I decided to get into property, it was suddenly really, really rewarding for me, and I made a lot of money very, very quickly in rapid succession. I made several million, and I can remember thinking, whoa, like architecture, I was earning like pennies, and now I've got millions in the bank. And then sure enough, 2008 came along, and next minute you're dealt a new hand. And now your new hand is that you're going to have to deal with extraordinary difficulties with the banks and all that. So you're always being dealt a new hand, and you've just got to try and play it to the best you can. And so my advice to both my daughter and to anyone listening is just like follow your passion and be open to where life takes you. Like, don't have fixed views about what's going to happen, because things always change. And then the final lesson is that it is never too late to start again. And I see an awful lot of people, they get dealt a difficult hand, and they get knocked down a peg or two, and maybe they suffer some sort of painful failure, and they basically give up on going after their dreams, and they let the grind, of it all just get them down. And I have a number of clients in my Accelerator and in my mastermind, stuff like that have actually gone through very similar situation to me. 2008, big crash, a lot of difficulty, And some of them had built up some significant businesses and, nice big portfolios, lots and lots of income coming in, and things were very well and stuff. And then all of a sudden you have to sit back and watch as it gets stripped away from you, either by the banks or by, the way the things crashed and stuff like that. It's very difficult. And I went through, so I know exactly how difficult it can be. But you don't ever give up, and you keep on striving. And you might kind of think, what's the point? Like, I'm now the age that I am. But what you've got to remember, there's a really great old quote, and it's a really old quote, but I like to remind myself. And it was by a man called Confucius, who was a Chinese philosopher, and he was alive 500 years before Christ. So 500 BC. And the quote is, "A man is great not because he hasn't failed. A man is great because failure hasn't stopped him." And when I think about that, I think, yeah, that's the lesson. It's never, it's how you react to the failure. It's how you react to the challenge. That is what determines what kind of person you are. And so keep on fighting. And one of the things that I want to remind those of you who are listening, and I see a lot of people joining my groups, my either my mastermind or my school community or my accelerator or whatever it is, and a lot of them are in their 40s and stuff like that, and so a lot of them will have been through some of these difficult times. The younger guys that are out there, they're too young to have experienced 2008, because if you were a teenager or something like that, then you weren't investing at the time, and so you wouldn't have experienced what it's like to have it all stripped away from you. But it's never too late to start. And here's a couple of examples. Consider Ray Kroc. Ray Kroc is basically attributed as the founder of McDonald's, the restaurant. And he did not start that business, or he did not get involved in the McDonald's business until he was 52 years of age. My age, the age that I am today. And a lot of the time I look back and I go, wow, 15 years ago, like I had the world in my hand, like I was being offered private jet, cards and all this kind of stuff, and traveling first class everywhere and stuff like that. And sure enough, a few years later, like I'm effectively bankrupt. And, life can really deal you difficult cards. But now at 52 years of age, if I start a business today, like Ray Kroc, perhaps it could turn into one of the biggest businesses in the world, McDonald's. The founder of the Huffington Post, a lady called Arianna Huffington, she was 54 when she decided to launch her website, which was a news website called the Huffington Post. She did that in 2005. And today it is one of the most influential news companies in the world. There's a man called Colonel Saunders. And those of you who know about, business, Colonel Saunders was the founder of Kentucky Fried Chicken, or KFC. And it was when he was 62 years of age, he was running a restaurant, and this restaurant was a popular restaurant on the side of a road, and then they decided to bypass the town. And so the road no longer went, the busy road that he had in front of his restaurant was gone. And now it was going off in a different direction. So all of the traffic stopped going past his front door, and his restaurant failed at 62 years of age. You can imagine what it would feel like to be 62 years of age and your income has dried up because of something like this. So what did he decide to do? He decided, I better go and take the recipes that I've developed and try my hand at franchising. And sure enough, KFC is now a global franchise business. And so it just shows you. Now, all of these are American entrepreneurs, and I'm conscious that so many of you that are listening are Irish. And so let's have an Irish example. And I think what you should think about is the life and legacy of Tony Ryan. Now, Tony today is remembered as the founder of Ryanair, but it's actually important to look back on his life, because he was born in 1936, and in 1976, at the age of 40, he founded Guinness Peat Aviation, or GPA as it was called. And I can remember when I was growing up, I was actually in school with his kids, and he was a real swashbuckling he was the big kind of business guy that was doing really, really well. And he built up this business, GPA, to the largest aircraft leasing business in the world, from little old Ireland in the 1980s to the biggest airline leasing company in the world. And then, in the middle of trying to launch an IPO to kind of take the business forward, and he was about to become one of the wealthiest men in the world, or certainly in Ireland, the thing failed, and that was it. The business failed, and in the end, he had to sell the business for a fraction of its value to General Electric. And he was a broken man. Tony Ryan was in deep, deep trouble. He had banks coming after him for millions because he had borrowed money to put into the shares of GPA, thinking he was going to become a billionaire and all this kind of stuff. And sure enough, he was in extreme struggle and difficulty. And as a little side hustle, while GPA was doing really, really well, he had started this little side hustle called Ryanair. And Ryanair, he thought, this little airline that would run back and forth to the UK, and it wasn't really going places. It was competing against Aer Lingus, didn't really stand a chance. And sure enough, the business was kind of on its knees with Aer Lingus running rings around it and making life very difficult. And at 58 years of age, Michael Leary was appointed by Tony Ryan as the CEO to basically try to turn the business around, try to make it work, because it was the only asset that he had left after all of this failure and all of these difficult times and stuff. And sure enough, Michael O'Leary turned it into one of the largest and most profitable airlines in the world. Now, whatever your views on Ryanair are, it's a remarkable story, and it's just remarkable how he was able to do that in his, basically in his 60s was when he started to enjoy success from Ryanair. And Tony Ryan died from cancer in 2007, a billionaire. He was 71 years of age, but what a legacy that he left. And so, guys, in conclusion, it's been a winding kind of a episode. And if you're still listening, I appreciate you listening in here. But I want you, thank you for joining me on this birthday reflection episode that I'm doing. Some of these life's lessons and wisdom of 52 years on rolling around the sun. And I hope you agree with me in my philosophy that age is just a number. It's really your whole attitude that determines what age you are. It's not what's the old saying? It's not the number of years, it's the number in your life, it's the amount of life in your years. And so I would suggest that you all embrace the journey and look out for those little lessons. And until next week, keep striving for those dreams of yours. And guys, I'll catch you next week. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Behind the Facade. If you enjoyed the show or found it in any way useful, could I ask you to please take a moment to leave a review on iTunes or Spotify, as this really helps the podcast reach more people. If you have any questions or topics you'd like me to cover in future episodes, please connect with me via my school community. You'll find a link in the show notes. And lastly, you can stay up to date with all of my content and projects that I'm working on by signing up for my weekly newsletter. You'll find a link in the show notes below. That's all for now. See you back here, same time next week.